This is not going to be an industrial automation discussion. It's going to be a philosophical one. So I apologize for interrupting your thread of thought if you were looking for industrial automation. I'm not presenting myself as an expert on the subject I'm going to discuss. I'm sharing with you my journey into studying truth and how the brain works to have better mind management. That's all I'm doing is sharing with you my thoughts. So if you were looking for something else, I apologize for interrupting what you were doing. And this isn't going to be perfect. This is fairly new to me to making videos of this type. I talk to a lot of people in discussing how to learn how the brain works, how the mind works, and what is truth, what isn't truth. And I found some interesting results, and that's what provoked me to create these videos. I hope you get something out of it. Thank you for your patience. The entire goal of this discussion is to make you aware of the relationship between your mind and your brain. It's going to take some concentration. It's taken me a while to really get a grasp on what's going on at every instance between my mind and my brain, and it's leading us to mind management. If you want to improve your ability to learn and concentrate and find the truth, you're going to have to manage your mind. In my pursuit of truth, one of the things that I have to do is some serious mind management. I have 5 senses, and the most powerful of all of my senses and your senses is your vision. So to bring it under control, I put an image in front of me that I can work with that will not be a distraction. This is such an image. I know that neither I nor any other human being has any influence on this image. I cannot change the time of day. I cannot change the sunlight, the clouds, the mountains, the trees, the grass, the water, the flowers. And I've decided I'm going to focus. And this is the image that I'm focusing on. No man-made objects in the image. My mind knows that I cannot change anything in this image. So that means that there's nothing man-made in here to perceive with my mind. And now it's going to be mind versus my brain. Your mind is not your brain. They're two completely different things. The mind basically combines what's coming in with your 5 senses, and whatever comes in the 5 senses, it causes a thought to begin to develop. Literally, your brain starts producing proteins, forming dendrites and other things on the neural cells. And then as it does, it goes like a breeze through all of your memories looking for anything to associate with. Perception and truth is the title for this discussion. Mind versus the brain. Consider this image. Also consider a unborn child in the womb. Their brain starts to function, their mind starts to function before they come out of the womb. They respond to their mother's voice. They can see brain activity. And so the brain starts to function long before they come out of the womb. Their eyes, though, even though they say that the retina is developed or almost fully developed, really there's not much to see. So the day they're born, let's say they come out of the womb, and this is what is in front of them. This is what fills their eye. When you and I look at it, we perceive thousands of things. A newborn child, when they look at it, they don't perceive anything because they have no memories, stored thoughts in their brain that they can associate with anything in this image. And yet, this exact image that you're looking at is focused on their retina in the back of their eye, going through the optical nerve into the brain. Their brain, in their occipital lobe and the visual cortex, this image is there right now, but they don't see anything. There's light, there's a sense of an image, but there's nothing in here for them to recognize. So the thought that's taking place in their brain right now, in their mind, as it breezes through the stored memories in their brain, there's nothing to breeze through because there's nothing stored there, save a few things like maybe a little language, sound recognition from their parents, talking to them in the womb, etc. There's nothing in this picture to associate with anything because they've never seen anything in this image before. But you and I can look at it, and you might even know the species of the flowers in the foreground here. And you can name off violet, yellow, white. You can look at, you see water. An infant doesn't know what water is. I see rocks. So I see mountains, I see grass, I see trees, I see thousands of things. Millions of details almost instantaneously. Every single needle on the pine trees. I mean, I can't, at this distance, can't pick them all out, but I can imagine them. What I can't pick out, I know they're there. So there's a lot of things going on with the adult brain and the mind that is not going on in an infant. But this exact image is on the back of their retina and going through their optical nerve into their visual cortex. But they have nothing to associate it with it. That's visual. Let's take hearing. Now, we don't have any sound with this image, but I could have added some. But you can imagine you might hear some birds. You might hear some water if there's something off to one side that we can't see here that has a stream trickling in. You might hear the wind. There are a number of things that you would hear, and if you were hearing those, you would instantly perceive what they are. A child would not. It doesn't sound like anything they've heard before. But we've all heard water running before. We've all heard the wind, and we've heard birds. So there's your vision, sound, and let's take touch. I can reach out in my mind and touch all those flowers, those plants. I can touch the water. I imagine it's probably pretty cold. At this altitude, I can stick my hand further in the water and I can pick up a stone or a rock. I can feel the kind of sediment or kind of dusty slime that's on the surface that's settled on those rocks. So I can feel many things. I could even take a sip of that water and add taste and immediately recognize kind of a mineral iron taste. So there's vision, sound, touch, taste, and hearing. So I can involve all five of my senses. I just described something to you while I'm watching this picture. When I'm looking at this picture, it's a static image in front of me, but I can recall every single one of those sensations. And when you do that, in other words, when you recall them from your non-conscious into your conscious, it's exactly the same thing as if they were really happening. Think about this. You've got five senses, and then in your frontal lobe, you have your active memory, your active thoughts that are breezing through all of your distant memories to associate with something. What I just described, touching, tasting, feeling, and everything, as they come up out of my non-conscious, they are exactly as if they were happening right this instant. I mean, just think about it. You got five senses and what's stored in your brain. So if you can remember these things I described that you experienced in some other associated or general intelligence about all these objects, then it is occurring in your frontal lobe just as if you were doing it right this instant, even though you're only thinking about it. That's an amazing thing, the brain. Another element in the images that I use is that I like reflection. I don't know what it is about water, but whether it's a creek, a lake, a river, an ocean, but there is something calming and soothing about water, whether it's mirror-like, near mirror-like, like this water, or it's a raging storm that evokes emotions. But I love images that have reflection. It's like you see all the details of nature twice and mirror images. So it's much more stimulating in the sense that the memories that it recalls out of your non-conscious are not in any way conducive to a real distraction. Because if you're trying to focus on the truth and you're staring at an image of nature, it's always the same. It just never changes. I mean, the time of day changes, but nature itself is somewhat unchanging. This is your brain, also my brain. The brain is divided up into sections, not at the whim of humans. There are definite demarcations between areas of the brain. And you don't have to know the terms for these individual areas, only that each area of the brain is identified with certain functions. The lobes of the brain is the main category. How do they determine which functions are realized in each area of the brain? Since you can't be inside another person's brain, they use imagery. In particular, and there's many kind of scans. This is a PET scan, and we can see from these images that varying levels of neuronal activity, with the warmer colors representing higher levels of activity, red being the highest, and the cooler colors representing lower levels of activity. And the reason that they can do this is because your brain uses 20 to 30% of all the calories that you dissipate. That's why most of the heat loss from your body is off the top of your head. And when you start to looking at how the brain is structured, the gray matter is a very thin layer around the outside of the brain, closest to the surface. That's where most of the energy dissipation takes place. They call that the gray matter. And immediately beneath that relatively thin layer is the white matter. These are all the axons and synapses that reach from one neuron to another, from one brain cell to another. They have you do something, and then they see what area of your brain lights up strongly when you do certain functions. Now, a PET scan is not a functional scan. fMRI, functional MRI scan, measures differences in blood flow and oxygen levels similar to an MRI scan. However, a functional MRI can be used while an individual is performing a task to look at changes in the brain activity over time. Coloring is then adding to the fMRI images to show within the brain there is increased or decreased brain activity. Back to our illustration of what a baby sees when they come out of the womb and they start taking in visual images, and they don't recognize anything that they see. There's just an image imprinted in their brain from their retina, and that goes for all the other five senses. So up until this point when the baby comes out of the womb, it's been thinking in the womb, and it does have some memories, but they're extremely limited. So for an infant, at least 1 million new neural connections, synapses, are made every second. That's amazing when you think about it. So for a newborn infant, at least 1 million new neural connections, synapses, are made every second, more than at any other time in their life. Many of these connections will be reinforced thousands of times per day, such as body motion and making sounds. And some of these connections started in the womb when the baby kicks. They are actually mapping out the motion neurons for being able to kick a specific leg at a given instance, or to move their arm, to move their fingers. So the babies are already developing that part of their brains and their memories for motion while they're still in the womb. And of course, they do hear some sounds. So when they come out of the womb, they are instantly flooded with millions and millions of pieces of data that make no sense. There's no information, it's just data. And so as they make data into information, in other words, they do something, they see something, they do it again, and they see it again, they literally are making connections between neurons in their brain. So here we see an image of two neurons, and we see the axon that comes away from neuron A, and it's making connections, a synapse, with the dendrites on another neuron. And then neuron B, it has an axon that is the output. So the output of a neuron is the axon. So the output of A connects to dendrites on B, and the output of B connects to dendrites on C, which is not shown, but it's done through synapses. So as these interconnect, and keep in mind, they don't know exactly everything that happens, but because the visual is in one part of your brain, the auditory is in another, the taste another, that neurons in all these different areas interconnect. And what you end up with is you create an engram. That's a term that means a network. It's an engram. It's a network of neurons. So you see in our graph, active versus dormant. So in active, this is a brand new thing in the baby's head. They're encoding and they're making a network of different neurons that will become a thought that converts into a memory. Okay, then they sleep, and during sleep, there's consolidation that takes place. So the encoding takes place during your conscious state. The consolidation takes place when you sleep, and then it goes into the dormant. And then the next day, if the baby senses the mother and it's hungry, then it retrieves that engram, that connection, and then it's there and it actually gets edited, meaning it gets reinforced. Maybe it adds some new things, the smell of the mother, just new things are added from the five senses, and then it reconsolidates and goes into the dormant state and then retrieved. So the engrams that you continually retrieve day after day after day, minute after minute, they get reinforced and they become automatic. So when I want to walk, I don't think about moving my legs or rotating my ankles. I just stand up and walk in a particular direction. It's just totally automated. But every bodily function that you have that is a decision that you make, I'm not talking about the involuntary like sneezing, coughing, breathing, digestion. I'm talking about when you have a multiple perspective advantage and you decide to do something, you are retrieving an engram. Now, it's not moving in your brain, it's just activated in the synapses, and the neurons start firing at about 250 times per second. So that's 4 milliseconds. Now, when you consider the massive interconnection, which is greater than the universe, between the neurons in your brain, 120 billion of them, and each neuron can have roughly up to 10,000 interconnections with other neurons. So that means if each neuron in your head, in your brain, is connected directly to 10,000 other neurons, that creates a structure that's beyond our comprehension and is more vast in its complexity than the known universe. What's taking place in the child's brain as it has its five expenses, as it has its five senses exposed to the outside world, is a extremely rapid rate of association and developing of memories. And at the risk of oversimplifying, this is what the baby's brain looks like until it starts thinking about things. In other words, it doesn't recognize anything, but it's still thinking about it. So to simplify this, I'm going to say it's like writing a dictionary. So as the baby learns words or sounds, it in its brain and its neurons, it has definitions of what these sounds make. So we'll just call that a dictionary that's in the process of being written. And then there's episodic memories, and let's consider that like an encyclopedia or a set of encyclopedias, and it's not complete. So the dictionary and the set of encyclopedias is very incomplete, but as we grow, we add more to our dictionary and more to our encyclopedia of things that have happened, both historical and political, wars, etc. We add more information in our encyclopedia. Now, this is in our brain. So this information, I'm showing it as books, stored information, but it's really stored in your brain, and most of it you can recall. Now, in school, we had problems remembering history, and You had to repeat it, rethink it to reinforce it to the point where you could remember it at test time. My point is that at this instant, the child's five senses are trying to make sense of what they see and hear, taste, smell, etc., and it's going into a dictionary of sounds or words, and it's going into a set of episodes or things that took place. You could add to that lands and peoples. That's another set of encyclopedia-like documents that really is more about geography and cultures than about episodes. Now, these were all books that I had access to as a kid, including the Book of Knowledge. So the point that I'm going to make is that as you are filling up the volumes in your brain with memories, it's all external. Everything comes from outside. You all take it in through your five senses, and that includes listening to people talk and them telling you what it means. So you have written your own volumes totally on your own. Now, you had an external influence, but that doesn't mean the external influence was correct. But if you cannot recognize that at any given moment, all that's happening with no external input, your five senses, you have a thought that's stimulated by these senses, and it's passing through all of the maze of neurons in your brain, all the non-conscious stored memories. That would be your dictionary and your set of encyclopedias, and you're looking for an association. And then you conclude what your five senses are sensing based on what memories you have. Now, if you can't agree that that's what's happening to you every instant of every waking moment of your life, now there's a third thing, and that is the influences that people are putting on you from your five senses, basically vision and hearing. So it's not simply what you see, but it is people who are saying things to you. Because remember, in the beginning, I pointed out, no one's born with any information you're not born with truth, which means that no other human being was born with it either. So if you're going to seek out truth, you have to keep this in mind, that it may be that everything or most of what is in your dictionary, encyclopedia, is not the truth. That's why you have to continually bring up and re-examine what you believe and why you believe it. Not just you decided that something was something and you build a stronghold in your head and you're not going to get budged. Because if you do that, you're going to end up like this plant. Now you see, the roots are analogous to thoughts. And if you have a fixed boundary for your thinking, then your thoughts can only stay inside of that boundary. It would be like a maze for a rat. The rat cannot go any place other than where the maze lets it go. But rats don't process like humans do. So the only way a rat ends up in a maze is if you put it in there. Okay? And the outcome's always going to be the same. They'll just wander around from one area to the maze to the other. Now, if you put food in certain locations, they can remember exactly how to navigate to the food or other pleasure things. So if you don't put an artificial boundary in your thinking, then what you see right here won't happen to you. You can see the shape of the pot, exactly. So if you create a maze for yourself, in other words, if you convince yourself that something is true when it's really not, you are building a maze for your thinking. And at some point, it will become so strong that you will not be able to escape from the boundaries and the maze that you created from your thinking. And this is the primary goal of what I'm presenting, is that if you don't continually question what you believe and what you think and how you think, then you'll end up like this plant. And your roots will not be able to extend out anywhere into the earth to gain what nutrition and water that it needs. And that doesn't mean that any place that the roots go is good, but they are free to think. And the only way this works is if you have a firm foundation of what you believe. You have to have absolutes. Otherwise, it all becomes relative, and it's like just being awash in an ocean in a storm looking for an anchor. We'll continue with this in another episode.